something interesting is happening on the world stage. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi appears to be extending a hand of friendship towards China. This move has caught the attention of many global observers and citizens alike. After years of very public disagreements and a noticeable chill in their relationship, this sudden shift is significant. It makes us ask a very important question: why now? What is the real reason behind this change in diplomatic temperature? Is it a strategic pivot, an economic necessity, or something else entirely? The world is watching closely as these two Asian giants, home to billions of people, cautiously step towards each other once again. The relationship between India and China has often been compared to a complicated dance. Sometimes they move in sync, and at other times, they step on each other's toes. The story of India and China's relationship is long and has deep roots, but it is most famously marked by the unresolved border dispute. The two countries share a very long border stretching over 3,400 kilometers across the difficult terrain of the Himalayas. Much of this border, known as the line of actual control, is not clearly demarcated. Both sides have different ideas about where the line should be drawn. This fundamental disagreement has been the primary cause of suspicion and conflict between the two nuclear-armed neighbors since the 1962 war. Over the years, there have been periods of relative calm and attempts to manage the dispute. Both sides signed agreements in the 1990s and early 2000s to maintain peace and tranquility along the border. However, even during these calmer times, the underlying tension never truly went away. Both India and China continued to build infrastructure like roads and airfields on their respective sides of the line of actual control. The fragile peace that had been maintained for decades was shattered in the summer of 2020. A violent clash broke out between Indian and Chinese soldiers in the Galwan Valley in Ladakh. This was the most serious military confrontation between the two countries in over 4 decades. Unlike previous face-offs, this one resulted in casualties on both sides, a tragic outcome that sent shockwaves across India and the world. The incident marked a dramatic and dangerous turning point. The established protocols for managing border tensions had failed, and the relationship plunged into a deep and bitter freeze. Both countries moved tens of thousands of additional troops and heavy weaponry to the border region. The Himalayas became one of the most heavily militarized zones on the planet. The fallout extended far beyond the military domain. The Indian government took a series of strong economic measures against China. It banned hundreds of Chinese mobile applications, including popular ones like TikTok. It tightened rules for Chinese investments in Indian companies and subjected imports to greater scrutiny. Business could no longer be as usual while soldiers were facing off at the border. After several years of a standoff, small but meaningful signs of a thaw have begun to emerge. So what has changed to make dialogue possible again? A key factor is a mutual, if unspoken, recognition that prolonged confrontation isn't serving long-term interests. For India, a massive border deployment is incredibly expensive and diverts resources from other priorities. The geopolitical landscape has shifted. The world now has multiple power centers and new global challenges. India and China are navigating this. India has been strengthening ties with Western countries, especially the United States, and through alliances like the Quad. But New Delhi values strategic autonomy. Re-engaging with China helps India balance its foreign policy. China's rationale: Beijing faces economic headwinds at home and growing pushback from the US and its Indo-Pacific partners. Stabilizing ties with India would be a strategic win. Most importantly, communication has shifted. After a long pause, leaders are meeting again. A notable moment: Modi and Xi had a brief chat on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in August 2023. The recent efforts to rebuild the India-China relationship can be seen across several fronts, starting with the economy. Despite the political tensions and calls for boycotts, bilateral trade has remained surprisingly robust and has even grown. This highlights a simple reality: the economies of India and China are deeply intertwined. China is a major source of electronics components, industrial machinery, pharmaceutical ingredients. Indian businesses rely on these supply chains. Diplomatic and military talks have also been re-energized. Since the 2020 clash, there have been over 20 rounds of corps commander-level talks between the two armies. While progress has been slow and incremental, these meetings have successfully led to the disengagement of troops from several key friction points: Galwan Valley, banks of Pangong Tso Lake. Another area of cautious re-engagement is in multilateral forums. Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. However, it is important to remember that this is a slow and fragile process. Trust, once broken, is very difficult to rebuild. Every step forward is taken with extreme caution. The warming of ties between India and China does not happen in a vacuum. It sends powerful ripples across the entire region and the globe. For India's immediate neighbors in South Asia, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, this is generally positive. These smaller nations are often caught in the middle, forced to balance relations. When tensions rise, they face pressure to choose sides. A reduction in hostility gives them breathing room to pursue their interests. This shift matters for global geopolitics, especially the United States and its allies. Washington has been building an Indo-Pacific strategy to counter China, with India as a key partner. The Quad is a cornerstone of that strategy. If India and China stabilize, some in Washington may question India's commitment to an anti-China coalition. From New Delhi's view, it's practical multi-alignment, engaging all major powers to expand strategic space. The rest of the world is watching how these two rising powers manage differences. Their relationship could be a model, for better or worse. If they compete peacefully and cooperate on shared challenges, it offers an alternative to old great power confrontations. This matters for countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So why does this renewed dialogue between India and China matter to the everyday person in India and across Asia? The answer is simple: stability. When two powerful, nuclear-armed neighbors are tense, the risk of conflict is always present. By choosing to talk, leaders choose to reduce that risk. It lets governments focus on domestic priorities like jobs, health, education. For the Indian economy, a more predictable relationship with China is very important. There's a push for self-reliance, Atmanirbhar Bharat, but many Indian industries still depend on supplies from China. A stable relationship keeps vital supply chains running and avoids sudden disruptions. Across Asia, cooperation between the two largest markets can drive regional growth, creating more trade and investment opportunities. Looking ahead, the path will likely be cautious. Don't expect a sudden resolution to the decades-old border dispute. That will take a long time. The relationship will likely be competitive coexistence, where both countries compete for influence but try to keep that competition from spiraling out of control. In the end, Modi's outreach is pragmatic, rooted in geopolitics and economics. For billions in India and across Asia, building fragile bridges across the Himalayas offers a glimmer of hope for a more peaceful, prosperous future. The world will be watching to see if they can walk that path successfully.